sexual consent, sexual abuse, and sexual harassment. These are terms that are being used in our culture more than ever. Do they all mean the same thing, or are they different? What does it matter anyway? Welcome to Passion Unlimited Podcast. I am your host, psychotherapist, author, and founder of Fearless Love. Even if you are not a sexual abuse survivor, understanding sexual abuse will help you be a well informed parent, well informed friend, and a well informed single who is dating. This is season 4 of Passion Unlimited podcast, and I am discussing topics that are in my Amazon bestseller, From Love Trauma to Fearless Love, so that you can receive tips and strategies so that you may survive, recover, and thrive in love, life, and relationships. In today's episode, I will be discussing and defining sexual abuse terms, as well as what is sexual consent and what is not sexual consent. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. Again, I am thrilled to be here with you guys today, and I want to thank those of you who have ordered the audiobook, and I thank you for those of you who are also adding your reviews. That's so important. Please, please, please leave me a review of the book if you read the book on Amazon. And if you listen to the audiobook, you can leave your review of the audiobook on audible.com or on Amazon. I would highly, highly appreciate it. Please, it's so important to leave your reviews because it's how other people will find out whether this book is any good, if it's helpful or not. And last week I read to you or shared with you some of the professional reviews that I've received on the audiobook, and I'm really proud of it. The audiobook, I was able to hire a voiceover actress from California who did an amazing job, Rebecca Ramirez, and she and I worked together to infuse the book with beautiful instrumental music, with beautiful ocean sounds and nature sounds, to really bring this book alive as a real production for you to really be brought into the scenes as I wrote them and as I had them in my head when I created this book. All right, so today we are going to cover terms on rape and sexual abuse. So just to begin, rape, sexual abuse, sexual assault, molestation, all of these things are degrading, violent behaviors that steal the safety and dignity of the victim, whether it's a woman, a child, or a man. And contrary to what most people believe, 7 out of 10 rapes are committed by someone the victim knows. That means that the rapist is within a family, within a school, a doctor, a friend, a family friend, a neighbor. These are the people that we all know, and these are people who wear masks. These are people that are double-faced. They have a duplicity. They have an ulterior motive. And on the outside, they look normal. They sound normal. They look like you and me, and they sound like you and me, but yet there's a very dark side to them. Okay? And today we're going to continue our Q&A style. So I'm going to continue to answer your questions on topics that I'm covering that I cover in my book, From Love Trauma to Fearless Love. So the first question that I'm going to attempt to answer is, I hear a lot of words thrown around about sexual abuse, sexual assault, rape, molestation, etc. Aren't they all the same thing? Are they different? What does it really matter? All right. So in the book, I'm going to actually go through the terms as I have written them in the book. I researched these terms with government websites and with RAINN, which is the rape, sexual assault organization that kind of sets up standards for us. I also even spoke to a sexual abuse educator. In fact, I have hired Bonnie Jean Alfred. She's from Chicago, and she's doing my marketing for my audiobook. And she's also an educator on this topic. And thus, we have so much synergy. And I'm so excited to have her on the team to help me and supporting me to bring out this message of hope, love, and awareness, and keeping people safe and healthy. So, Bonnie Jean, thank you. And she's also helped me with some of the questions that are important and permanent for me to like really provide to help you to be informed. All right. So the first question, the first term that I would like to address is sexual harassment. So sexual harassment is a term that's usually heard specifically a lot in corporate America and in the workplace. And this means sexual advances and requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical harassments of sexual nature. So examples would be somebody's touching you and it's inappropriate. They should not be putting their hands on your hips or your thighs, or maybe coming down your arms, creating some sort of like tingling sensation or something. Maybe they're touching your face, or even your hair. These are things that you did not request. It's inappropriate. These are clear boundary crossings between employers or employee, or or just between coworkers. Another example of this is the naked photos, requesting naked photos of you. So maybe somebody has been working their way in charming you, and this happens a lot. And I've heard this before over and over again, where somebody is being very friendly to you, and next thing you know, you're communicating via text day and night, and now they're requesting, like very seductive pictures of yourself, compromising pictures of yourself. And because this has been going on now for weeks, and you guys see each other, at work, now you start sending sexy pictures of yourself, or even naked pictures of yourself. Well, guess what happens when you send those sexy pictures of yourself? You are now involved in a trap, because once you recognize that this person is just using you for his entertainment and his enjoyment, there is no date, there is no real relationship, or maybe it will escalate to where this person does take you out, and there is some sort of relationship that's going on, but it's a hidden relationship. It's not out in the open. Recognize that narcissists and narcissistic people, predators, everything they do is around a secret. So your relationship is not going to be out in the open, where everybody knows that you guys are boyfriends and girlfriends, and that you are serious about each other, and that you care about one another. It's all secret. And what's going to happen is, once you send out those sexy pictures, whether or not you guys get into a relationship or not, they're going to be used against you. And over again, they will be used against you. And you know it, that this is going to be all blackmail. So now all of a sudden they have the upper hand and control over your life. And people are like, so why didn't you blow the whistle? Well, when somebody has incriminating pictures of you, you're not going to be so quickly in blowing the whistle. So there's always like this fear. They know how to entrap us, so that we are now dangling by their strings and under their control. Okay. So another term I want to explain is sexual assault. So sexual assault is any type of sexual conduct or behavior that occurs without the explicit consent of the recipient, such as forced sexual intercourse, child molestation, incest, fondling, and attempted rape. So the sexual assault, there has to be some form of attempted, penetration, and that they, some sort of attempted penetration to be a sexual assault. I remember I had a client who, again, at her workplace, this time it was an intruder who had entered the building. And she worked in a place by herself, in an office by herself, and this intruder had entered the building and found himself in her office and ended up closing the door behind him and locking them in, threatening her. He wanted money. At first he wanted money, and then it turned into an attempted rape. He, attempted, like he held her down, tried to, force himself. It didn't ultimately happen. It was just too much chaos, too much craziness, and ultimately fled the building, and she ended up in the hospital. But it was an attempted assault because after he had mugged her, he had attempted to rape her, and he didn't get the opportunity to penetrate her, but he had already touched her inappropriately and in inappropriate places, so it was considered an assault. The sexual abuse is when there's attempts that don't, so the sexual act committed against someone without the person's freely given consent, and there is no penetration. So here, maybe the person did not remove your undergarments, as it did in the sexual assaults where that woman was mugged first, and then there was attempted rape. Her undergarments were removed, and this is where he was headed. So with the sexual abuse, maybe the undergarments have not been removed, but there's obviously the hands are going to places that they should not be going, so the person is feeling violated, completely violated. So sexual violence. This is divided into the following types: completed or attempted forced penetration of a victim, completed or attempted alcohol, drug facilitated penetration of a victim, completed or attempted forced acts in which a victim is made to penetrate a perpetrator or someone else, non-physically forced penetration, which occurs after a person is pressured verbally or through intimidation or misuse of authority to consent or acquiesce. Unwanted sexual contact, non-contact, unwanted sexual experiences. So here, the non-contact non-contact unwanted sexual experiences, exposure to porn, or someone is exposing themselves to you without your consent. So for all those people out there who are dating, and we have all these perverts out there who decide to send you pictures of their private parts, this is considered sexual violence. It is considered sexual harassment as a sexual assault to you. You did not request a picture of someone's penis, and they're sending you the picture, and you can actually take this to the police and report them. I would obviously block them and not have anything else to do with them and move on, because if someone wants to date you and this is the first few weeks, this is what's happening, then you know that that's all they're after, and they obviously don't have any respect for themselves or respect for you. Okay, definition for rape: the penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or the anus with any body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ of another person without the consent of the victim. Here, I remember had a client a long time ago who in college was forced to perform oral sex to this man. And she was humiliated, ashamed, scared, and obviously, she never talked about it to anyone until she came to therapy. And she was just when she discussed it, the horror involved and the shame involved around that act. All right, so moving on to the next question. What is sexual consent anyway? Being that we have so much going on now around, all of this topic. So consent means that both people in a sexual encounter agree to it. And either person may decide at any time that they no longer consent and they want to stop the activity. But consenting has a lot of conditions. So don't think for a minute that somebody said okay or yes, all of a sudden gives you, the green light to do whatever the heck you want to do. Okay, so some of these conditions to consentings are: consenting to one behavior does not obligate an individual to consent to another behavior. Okay. I remember I had once went out on a date with a guy, and it was not a date. I had gone out with him several times already, and enough for me to say, that I had been sexually violated in one of my relationships, and this man had no idea how I or anybody could be sexually violated once you're in a relationship. Red flag, and run as fast as you can. And of course I did, because I was like, wow, we've got people in the dark ages still. This is why I'm doing this podcast, so that we can educate you guys. Okay. So once you're in a relationship, that doesn't give you a green light that you're allowed to do whatever the heck you want, whenever the heck you want, with another human being in the area of sex or any other area of their life. A relationship is collaborative, and the two of you need to communicate and come into agreement onto everything that you are agreeing to do together. Okay, so continuing on the different conditions around consent. Another condition is consenting to one occasion does not obligate the individual to consent on any other occasions. And this happens a lot in colleges, where the perpetrator may have been able to gain access to the victim to get the sexual favors that he wants or wanted at the time of the party or whatever the situation. And then all of a sudden he keeps showing up to the dorm or to the home where the victim lives and expects that these same behaviors will continue. Okay, so that is a no-no. All right, so the next thing is consent is not gained when the perpetrator gains the victim's agreement and compliance through deception or fraudulent statements or actions. So this is actually exactly what happens with the sociopaths and a lot of the narcissists who present to be one thing and show up to be something else. I remember when I was doing my research in the book, I forget which state this happened in. I don't know if it was like Nevada, but it certainly would sound like something that would happen in Nevada. Some guy sets up a fake porn like job listing. So stupid, but it really works. So anyways, the problem was that he created this fake porn job listing, and he had plenty of takers. He had plenty of young ladies, and I think he even had some young men who applied for this job. And part of the requirements, according to him and his, I guess, role, how he was going to hire these people, was that they actually had to perform sexual favors and have sex with this individual. So when enough of these victims found out that there was no real job behind this sexual act, I believe they reported this to the FBI, in which then the FBI had to investigate this fraudulent, narcissistic, sociopathic human being. Because who else would come up with these crazy ideas? Like you and I are probably like, I couldn't even fathom. I couldn't even think of something like that. That is just beyond what I could even imagine. So anyways, so the FBI obviously had to go in and investigate this fraudulent, narcissistic, sociopathic individual, and obviously found out it was all a setup where he was luring innocent young ladies and young men and having them do sexual acts and there was like no real job. So it's all fake and fraudulent. So all these people were sexually assaulted or sexually violated. They were basically raped. Okay, so when a person is pretending to be something that he or she is not and cannot deliver on those goods and using sex as a form of payment, again, this is all coming in under sexual violations and rape. All right. Consent is not granted when the victim is intoxicated or under the legal age to consent. Yes. So having sex with drunk or people who are high can land you in the slammer. So I would stay away from that. All right. Third question. All right. I was raped. My friends tell me to just get over it. How do I explain to them what it really means to be raped? All right. So the first thing, people, I want to help you understand is rape is not about sex. Rape is about power over another human being. It's always about power. These people are very, very deeply injured, insecure. Deep down inside, they feel very insignificant. And in order to find significance in this world, they find it through actually taking power over another human being. This is why they're so narcissistic and sociopathic. So typically, rape is a betrayal of the victim's trust. And it often does not involve aggressive force. So like these people, and I think it was out in Nevada that this happened. So these people out in Nevada, they were tricked and set up to believe that there would be a working relationship with the perpetrator, and they were tricked. It was a manipulation. It wasn't true. The same thing happens with the majority of victims of abuse, like myself, or so many women and young men who have been violated within the family or within the school or a doctor or coach. These are all rapes that are happening within a pretended relationship where there's no safety or security or truth or honesty. It's all facades and it's all fake. But the perpetrators are very good at lying and deceiving. Thus, they get away with this over and over again because usually it's not just one victim. There's usually a trail of victims in these people's lives. Okay, so the perpetrator's main pleasure is derived from causing emotional pain to his victim by tricking or manipulating her for his own gratification. And I know I say her as the victim, and that's because the majority of perpetrators are mostly men. Very few predators or females. They're mostly all men. Mostly all sociopaths are men as well. So the grand majority of the victims tend to be the women, young women, and then children and young men, boys as well. And the stats are 1 in 3 women are sexually assaulted and raped and throughout their lifetime, and 1 in 6 men are raped. All right, so when a perpetrator forces sex through pressure, coercion, manipulations, sleep deprivation, and forbidden the victim to change her mind, the victim doesn't know what to call it. So again, a lot of this sexual violence happens within a relationship, within, two people who have entered into a romantic relationship together, and the victim is no longer allowed to say no to the perpetrator. And normally what happens with in this scene is that the perpetrators and the predator, it's like a whiny little child, because I've experienced that. They're like whiny little children, and you say no and they start whining that you're not in the mood, you've got a headache, you've got a stomach ache, whatever, you're just not interested, it's too soon to engage sexually. They start whining like little babies. They cannot accept no, they cannot accept an unmet need, because again, they're also like an addict, and they also need to know like they're in control. So all of this keeps driving them to having to change your no into a maybe or into a yes. And it's part of their whole psychological game to gain power over you. It's kind of very sickening. Again, these people, this is how they're deriving their sense of power. Okay, so when experiencing sexual abuse and rape, what happens is this is very confusing for the trauma, for the victim. So it goes into fight, flight, or freeze. Basically, there's a traumatic response in the victim's brain. And if there's a relationship where is this is where most of the rapes are happening within some sort of relationship. What happens is then the victim is split up, and in her sense of, in herself, she's split up, where she's like, she's trying to preserve the relationship, and at the same time, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't sound right, doesn't feel like it's part of this relationship, or it's not really what I want or ask for. So there's all this confusion, there's massive confusion going on in the victim's brain. So in reference to explaining this and why it takes so long to heal from sexual abuse and sexual violence, there are so many layers of betrayal that is involved when a woman or a young man or a child or girl is violated sexually. First of all, relationships are supposed to be the healthiest and safest place on the planet where we as human beings can be. They are to be safe harbors. So there is this negligence. The betrayal represents a negligence of the safety, the negligence of the respect, the negligence of the care that is owed to you in that relationship, and whatever else is owed to you within that relationship. Because if it's a business relationship or a romantic relationship or a family relationship, there's a lot that goes on in maintaining and having those relationships. There's a lot of responsibilities in maintaining a healthy relationship. So there's layers and layers of betrayals that need to be healed. So the negligence, there's the betrayal of emotional abuse and the boundary crossings, of mental abuse because of all the lies and the deception. This is all mental and emotional abuse. Then there's the betrayal, the sexual betrayals, which should have never happened, or should, if they were romantic partners and the woman did not want to have sex, or, whoever did not want to have sex, that should not have happened. The no should have been respected. There is sometimes also physical violence that has occurred that also need to be grieved. All these betrayals. So again, love trauma, as I call it in my book, is the betrayal of trust. It's the trauma of betrayal and the betrayal of your trust. That's really what it comes down to. And that's what ultimately comes down to with all of this, the violations. It's such a deep betrayal of who you are as a human being. And all of that has to be grieved. All of that has to be brought to light and healed. So the next question is, I have heard of this thing called rape trauma syndrome. What is it? All right, so rape trauma syndrome is another form of, basically response to trauma. It's a trauma response. It's the same thing as if you, got caught up in a hurricane or a huge accident, and you were left traumatized. So there's different ways of expressing that trauma. Everybody expresses their traumas a little bit different. So one way of expressing that trauma would be you would express it, and maybe the victim is crying uncontrollably, is hysterical, has panic attacks, anxiety attacks. So this is one way of expressing that syndrome, but not everybody goes there into that place. Another response to that trauma would be controlled. And this is when the survivor appears to be without emotion and acts as if nothing has happened and everything is fine. And initially, that's how I responded, very controlled within those first few days when that had happened to me. And so everything looked calm, and I looked very fine in appearance. And that's because in my brain, my brain had to choose to honor and love and honor the love that I thought we had and save face, let's say. So I went into that whole place of disbelief, which is the third option that people have, which is shocked disbelief. This is when the survivor acts reacts with a strong sense of disorientation. He or she may have difficulty concentrating, making decisions, or doing everyday tasks. He or she may also have poor recall of the assault. Okay, so for me and Elena, and the way I wrote it for Elena, she goes into the controlled, which is everything's fine, but then this shock disbelief started to manifest probably like a month later after the rape. Then she went into panic attacks and a lot of physiological response. But again, she kept it to herself and she wasn't telling anybody about it, and which is the nature of most rape victims, because there's so much shame and humiliation involved in this. And of course, the victims basically all blame themselves for many reasons. So these are all things that need to be worked through. All right, another question. I have heard you cannot give consent if you are drunk. Does that make me a rapist because I hooked up with some drunk people? How do I fix this, and how can I do that? All right, so the first thing I want you to do is to ask yourself and answer your own question. So I want you to ask yourself these questions. If you are hooking up with random people and using alcohol and drugs in order to be able to have sex, you need to ask yourself these questions. What am I doing? If you are honest about what you are doing, then your answers are going to be close to, I am using another human being and I'm allowing them to use me. You're using and abusing, because that's what using is when it comes to human beings. What am I looking for? If you're honest, you're going to say you're looking for love, you're looking for excitement, you're looking to escape boredom. And there's a whole bunch of other things that you can be looking for. So I want you to ask yourself another question. What do I need? Again, if you're honest, what you need is connection. What you need is affection. You need to be seen. You need to matter to another human being. Am I respecting myself or the other person? That's another question I want you to ask yourself. And are you respecting yourself or the other person? When you divorce intimacy from the act of sex, you have now moved into an area of using people for your needs. And when you use people, we degrade them, we devalue them as objects to meet an end. Using people robs them of their human dignity and their sense of worth. If you find yourself on either side of this camp, whether you are the victim of sexual abuse, where you have been used by a perpetrator, or you are the perpetrator and have been the perpetrator in the past, you each need to find healing. I would suggest finding a therapist, such as myself, that understands this topic and this theme and this problem and this situation in our society. And I would highly recommend that you would also find a mentor to help you to work through this journey of healing. And again, I got to tell you, I promise you that if you decide that you want healing, you will get to the other side. You will become more empowered over your life. You will be a much happier, confident individual. Life will start to flow for you, and you will start attracting healthier people into your life. Don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on your life. Joy and happiness, peace, all this is really available to anyone who has suffered greatly in the hands of another, or if you are the one who has caused so much great pain to others. There is healing for both of you. I love you, and stay tuned for next week. Thank you so much.